They said it was time I grew up. What they meant was, give up your room, your place, your voice. I'm Julia, and this is the story of how my brother's baby announcement nearly erased me. But instead, it awakened something unstoppable. Before we get into it, tell me, where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. It started like any other morning. Sunlight pouring into the kitchen, birds chattering outside the window, and me halfway through my first cup of coffee. I just sat down, wrapped in the quiet warmth of home when Greg came in, my older brother, the golden child. "Hey," he said casually, pouring himself a glass of orange juice, not even looking at me. "Maya's pregnant." The words dropped into the room like a stone into a still lake. I blinked. "Wow," I said, setting my mug down carefully. "That's big. Congrats, I guess." He smiled, but not at me, past me. "Yeah, so we're gonna need your room. Mom and Dad think it's time you grow up anyway." I actually laughed, like a dry, nervous kind of laugh. "Excuse me. You've had it for years. Come on, Jules. Maya's gonna need the space. You're not a kid anymore. You can move downstairs or something. It's just logical." Logical. Let me explain something. I'm 27. I work remotely. I pay the utilities. And I've stayed in this house out of convenience and, frankly, because I thought we were a family that looked out for each other. I remodeled my room with my own savings. I installed the blackout curtains. I put up the shelves. It's not just a room, it's mine. "I'm sorry, what?" I said again, louder this time. Greg didn't flinch. "It's not a big deal, Julia. You've been taking up space for long enough. Maya's pregnant. It's time you think about someone other than yourself." I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My parents walked in just as my jaw dropped open. "Greg, can we not?" I started, but Mom cut in, clapping her hands once like a kindergarten teacher wrapping up circle time. "Julia, honey, this isn't about taking sides. It's about growing up. Your brother's starting a family." "In my room," I snapped. "That's what growing up looks like now, getting pushed out of your own space because someone else made a baby." My father cleared his throat. "It's not about the room. It's about your attitude. You've been coasting, haven't you? This is a chance for you to be generous. Family comes first." Family, that word again, always used as a leash. "I've been coasting," I whispered, stunned. "You think I've been coasting?" "Don't make this ugly, Jules," Greg said, suddenly all patient and calm like he hadn't just blindsided me with a full-blown eviction notice. "We're just asking you to do the right thing." There it was, the guilt grenade. Do the right thing. I stood up so fast my chair screeched against the hardwood. "You're not asking," I said. "You're telling there's a difference." Nobody said a word. I looked around the kitchen at the people who were supposed to have my back, and all I saw were closed faces, closed ranks. "You know what?" I said, my voice shaking but rising. "Fine, you want the room, take it, but don't you dare call this growing up. This isn't maturity, this is erasure." I grabbed my coffee and walked out, not defeated, but changed. Because here's what they didn't know, that house? It was mine. Legally. I hadn't planned on using that card, not until they left me no other choice. But that day, that was the beginning. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because of what they said, but because of how quickly they said it, like they'd rehearsed. Like my room, my presence, my whole existence in that house had been up for quiet negotiation for weeks without me knowing. So I curled up on my bed with Marley, my cat, my sanity, and tried to pretend that the walls weren't closing in. But they were. Even the lavender candle I always lit before bed didn't smell like peace anymore. It smelled like warning. Around 10:45 p.m., just as I was finally drifting off, I heard a soft knock. Then, like she owned the place, Maya pushed the door open and walked in. She was wearing a fluffy robe and that tight little smile she always wore when she wanted to seem harmless, but never quite managed it. "Hey," she chirped, holding up a pair of jeans, my jeans. "So, small oops. I tried to be helpful and did a load of laundry, but I accidentally threw these in with towels. I think I shrunk them." She held them up like she was offering a cat that had been hit by a car. Pity with a bow on top. I sat up, blinking hard. "Those are my 7s. "Yeah, I know," she said, twisting the denim in her fingers. "They looked expensive. I thought I was being helpful." Of course she did. I got out of bed slowly. "Did you ask before taking them out of my hamper?" Maya blinked like the thought was foreign. "I figured it was just laundry." It's not just laundry when it's my things. She gave a soft laugh. Okay, chill, it's not that deep. There it was, that phrase, the ultimate silencer. It's not that deep. The translation. Your feelings are too big and I don't want to deal with them. I stepped forward and took the jeans from her, feeling the fabric that was now a size too small and warped out of shape. These cost me 2 weeks of freelance work. They're ruined. She pouted. Well, I said I was trying to help. You don't have to be so dramatic. I clenched my jaw. Marley, who had hopped onto the windowsill, flicked her tail, sensing the shift. I wanted to scream, or throw something. Or give her a 10-minute TED talk on boundaries and how laundry doesn't make you a saint. But instead, I swallowed it all down. And I said tightly, just ask next time. Maya nodded slowly, as if doing me a favor. Sure, whatever makes you comfortable. That word, comfortable, sounded like a knife in her mouth. And then she was gone, just like that, floating out of my room like she'd done nothing wrong. No apology, no accountability. Just that same sticky sweetness she always used when she wanted to win without fighting. I stood there in the middle of my room holding shrunken denim and fury. The thing about Maya, she never came at you with fists. She used soft power, guilt, smiles, innocence. She weaponized incompetence with Olympic precision so that any protest you made sounded petty. That was her game. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already started playing a different one. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, turning the deed over in my hands. The original, with my name, Julia Reese Harrington, clear as day across the top. My grandmother had left me this house. Not Greg, not my parents, me. They'd signed papers letting it transfer directly to me after the will cleared. I'd filed everything with the county myself 2 years ago, and I'd never said a word, because back then I thought being quiet was the polite thing. That letting them live under the illusion that they ran things was easier than starting fights. But now, I looked around the room Maya had already begun claiming piece by piece. The delicate bookshelf she'd commented on last week. The mirror she said would look so cute in the nursery. The carpet, she said, might be better in the hallway. Little invasions, all dressed up as compliments. I folded the deed back into its folder and slid it under my mattress. Let them think I was spineless. Let them think they'd won. I wasn't done yet, not even close. I woke the next morning to the smell of burnt something. You know that scent that clings to air like warning? Tangy, acrid, just enough to make your nose twitch and your stomach tense. It was coming from the dining room. Still in my pajamas, I padded down the hallway, Marley following close behind like a furry little shadow, and there at the head of the table sat Maya, barefoot, radiant, stirring sugar into her coffee with one hand while the other casually rested on my laptop. My MacBook, the one I used for work, the one I'd had since grad school, the one I bobbied with protective cases and careful charging habits, the one that now smelled faintly of burnt wiring. My chest tightened. She looked up, smiling like we were girlfriends meeting for brunch. Morning, she chirped. I made coffee. Hope you don't mind I used your creamer, and I might have, kind of, spilled a little. I blinked. Spilled a little what? She winced slightly and pushed the laptop forward with her pinky finger. Just a splash. I was reaching for the phone and the cup tipped. I cleaned it up right away. I moved to the table and saw the faint halo of coffee stain around the keyboard. The power light blinked weakly. It was still on, I said quietly. Maya shrugged. I know, but it's just a computer, right? Just a computer. I reached out and pressed the power button. The screen flickered once, then blacked out completely. A faint click sounded beneath the keyboard. Maya, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice even. This wasn't just a computer, it was my work, my projects, my writing, everything. She tilted her head. Don't you have backups? I didn't answer. Because yes, I had backups, but not from the past 3 weeks. And that included 2 client projects and a grant proposal I'd been pouring myself into. You should really get cloud storage, she added helpfully, sipping her coffee again like we were swapping tech tips instead of standing over the smoldering wreck of my professional life. I opened my mouth, closed it. The air felt like glass, thin and dangerous. From the hallway, Greg's voice cut through the tension. What's going on? He walked in, yawning, hair a mess, looking like a man entirely unaware that his wife had just torched my lifeline. Maya spilled coffee on my laptop, I said simply. Greg looked at her, Seriously, she shrugged. It was an accident. Greg turned to me. Come on, Jules, it's not like she did it on purpose. We all make mistakes. Of course, I said tightly. It's just the third one this week. Greg raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means she shrunk my jeans, took my mug, and now this. I gestured to the laptop, my voice climbing. And every time it's an accident, every time it's not that deep. Greg rubbed his temples. This again. My jaw dropped. This again. You're making everything about Maya lately. You're on edge, Julia. I get that this transition is hard, but can you please just transition? I snapped. Is that what this is now? A gentle handover of everything I own and worked for so you two can play house in my room. His eyes narrowed. It's our family home, Julia. And there it was. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not my brother, but a man who genuinely believed I was overreacting to my life being disassembled in slow motion. From behind him, I heard footsteps, my mother. Can we please keep the peace? She said, holding her morning tea like it was some kind of neutral offering. Maya's carrying a child, Julia. A little grace would be nice. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or tell them the truth right then and there, that I own this house, that every mug and curtain and bill had my name on it. But I didn't, not yet. Instead, I nodded slowly and whispered, noted. Then I picked up my dead laptop with both hands and walked away. Behind me, Maya sighed. I really was trying to help. Of course she was, just like arsonists try to warm the room. The walk did nothing. I thought a few blocks, a coffee, and the crisp fall air would clear my head. But when I returned home, the pit in my stomach had only gotten deeper. And the house was quiet. Too quiet. Marley wasn't at the window to greet me, which was strange. Normally, she'd be perched on the sill, tail twitching like a metronome, eyes locked on the driveway the second I came into view. Instead, the only thing I saw when I opened the door was a large suitcase, mine leaning against the wall by the stairs. I froze. Then I stepped forward slowly, heart pounding, eyes scanning. Something was off. The air smelled like lemon cleaner, the kind we only used after moving furniture. I took another step, and that's when I saw it. The hallway mirror was gone. So was the woven rug I'd bought with my first freelance paycheck. A weird chill ran through me as I walked to my room and pushed the door open. Except it wasn't my room anymore. The bookshelf was empty. My bed was stripped bare, my mattress replaced with Greg's old one, the one with the dent in the middle. In the corner, Greg sat with his feet propped up like a king on borrowed land, scrolling through his phone like this was just any other Sunday. Maya stood in front of the closet, humming softly while folding baby clothes into neat little stacks. My stomach dropped. What is this? I said quietly. Greg looked up, unfazed. We moved your stuff downstairs, figured it'd be easier than asking you to do it. Maya turned, holding a tiny yellow onesie like it was a flag of victory. You were out for hours. We thought we'd help speed things up. You moved my things. To the basement, Greg said, like that made it better. It's still in the house, Julia. It's not a big deal. The phrase, again, not a big deal. I took a step back, breath catching. Your bed's down there, Maya added brightly. And we left the string lights on for Marley. Oh, and I made the bed with those flannel sheets you like. There was no flannel. I could already picture it, cold cement floors, spiders nesting in corners, and that awful musty smell that never really left, no matter how many air fresheners you plugged in. You didn't ask, I whispered. You didn't even warn me. Greg shrugged. It's just a room, Jules. You don't live here, I snapped louder now. Neither of you do, you're guests. Maya's lips parted in mock offense. We're family. No, I said. You're squatters with good PR. Greg stood, defensive now. That's enough. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it's never enough for you. Not until you take everything, the room, the space, my stuff. What next, Greg? My toothbrush, my socks. I think you're being a little dramatic, Maya cut in. I turned to her. You've been here 3 months and you've already taken more from me than I ever offered. I'm pregnant, she said, as if that justified theft. I'm alive, I shot back. That should count for something, too. Greg stepped forward. Maybe it would just be better for everyone if you left the house altogether. There it was. The curtain lifted. The end goal finally said out loud. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I laughed. A quiet, sharp little sound that didn't belong to me until now. Okay, I said, turning toward the hallway. Wait, where are you going? Maya asked. I'm going to check on Marley, I replied, walking to the basement door. And there, at the top of the stairs, in a neat row of cardboard boxes and old plastic bins, were all my things. My framed prints, my journals, my tax paperwork, dumped unceremoniously next to a broken vacuum and a tub of tangled Christmas lights. It was poetic, really. I walked down the stairs slowly, each step colder than the last. Marley meowed from the far corner, sitting dutifully on a suitcase like a tiny sentry. And then, sitting right where I left it, half buried under a blanket, was the deed. My name, my house, my move. I sat down on the mattress they'd tossed onto the floor and picked up the paper with steady hands. The words didn't blur this time. I read every line, every initial, every stamp. They had no idea. And maybe that was about to change. There's a particular kind of silence in a basement at night. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of everything you don't want to hear. The creak of old pipes, the hum of the water heater, the occasional scurry of something unseen in the wall, but worse than all that is the laughter floating down from upstairs. I sat cross-legged on the mattress they'd tossed into the corner, staring at a dented tin lamp that barely lit the room. Marley nestled beside me, purring her head against my thigh like she knew I needed anchoring. Upstairs, they were celebrating. I couldn't make out every word, just the mood, the clink of glasses, the occasional burst of laughter, the deep baritone of my father's voice trying to sound jovial, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been demoted from family member to forgotten tenant. The smell of roast chicken drifted down the vents, mocking me. I didn't eat with them. I didn't speak. I didn't ask for anything. But just before 9 p.m., the basement door creaked open, and a plate descended in my father's hand. He didn't look at me at first. Just placed the food down on a nearby box, the way someone might set out scraps for a stray cat. Chicken, green beans, a half-roll, lukewarm by now. Thought you might be hungry, he muttered. Thanks, I said, voice flat. He lingered, half in shadow, his silhouette blocking the stair light. They're just trying to get settled, he said finally. It's a big change. For them, I asked, staring at the plate. Or for me, he sighed. You've always been a little sensitive, Jules. There it was, the soft slap. I didn't answer. He shifted awkwardly, then added, try to be patient. Greg's got a lot on his shoulders, a baby on the way, Maya's fragile. I noticed, I murmured. She didn't mean to upset you. None of us did. I turned my eyes toward him, meeting the outline of his gaze. Then why does it feel like you all practiced how to forget me? He didn't answer that. Just stepped back into the stairwell, leaving a hollow silence behind him. I picked at the food, not because I was hungry, but because I needed to do something with my hands. Marley blinked up at me, eyes wide, watchful. I'm fine, I told her, more lie than truth. But somewhere inside me, somewhere beneath the salt of rejection and the sting of betrayal, there was a small ember, hot, unyielding. I wasn't going to be erased quietly. Not by Greg, not by Maya, not even by the parents who now treated me like a buffer zone for their son's comfort. I stood, careful not to disturb Marley, and crossed to the far corner where I'd stacked my boxes. Inside one of them was a photo album I hadn't touched in years, sepia-toned pages, captions in my grandmother's handwriting, little notes about who stood where in each picture, page after page of memories in this house, birthday candles in this very kitchen, holiday dinners under the same chandelier that now sparkled over Maya's triumph. I wasn't squatting in their space. They were squatting in mine. And they were about to remember that. I slid the album back into the box, picked up the folder with the deed, and sat back down on the mattress, Marley curling into the crook of my arm. I wasn't going to storm up the stairs. Not yet. Power wasn't about shouting. It was about waiting until the right moment and making sure when it came there'd be no mistaking who held the ground. They thought I was stuck in a basement. What they didn't realize, I was storing firewood. I woke up to darkness. Not the soft, familiar kind. Not the kind that whispers safety or rest. This was a thick, suffocating dark, unnatural, like the world had blinked and forgotten to reopen its eyes. I blinked several times. No change. The tiny lamp I kept on the box beside the bed was dead. Marley wasn't at my side. The usual hum of the hallway light upstairs, the one that always bled under the basement door, was gone. I sat up slowly, skin prickling. That's when I realized The basement door was shut. No light, no voices, no footsteps from the kitchen above. I called out once, then again louder. My voice echoed back at me like a taunt. A third time, still nothing. The panic didn't hit all at once. It arrived in pieces. First, the realization that my phone, plugged into the wall beside the washer, was upstairs. Then the sharp memory of Greg saying, maybe it'd be better if you left the house altogether. Then the click. Last night, when Dad had brought the food down, he hadn't looked at me directly. He'd stood halfway in the shadows, awkward, nervous. He hadn't stayed long. He hadn't even asked if I needed anything else. I stood and crept toward the steps, hands out, tracing the old wooden banister that groaned under my weight. I reached the top and pressed my palm to the door. It didn't move, not even a little. I jiggled the knob, locked, not jammed, not stuck. Locked. I knocked. Then banged. Then slammed both palms against it with every ounce of force I could muster. Nothing. The air turned sour in my mouth. They'd locked me in. Marley meowed from behind me, her small voice slicing through the tension. I turned to see her perched near the laundry basket, blinking in the dark, tail flicking in confusion. I walked back down and sat beside her. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't Maya forgetting to separate the jeans, or spilling coffee, or folding onesies in my room. This wasn't a misstep or a misunderstanding. This was intentional. I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being contained. Hours passed, I don't know how many. The walls of the basement never changed. No clock, no light, only silence and the occasional thump of someone upstairs living like I didn't exist. By the time I heard the lock click, my heart had slowed to a steady thud. Not fear, resolve. The door creaked open. My father stood there, his hand still on the knob, not meeting my eyes. "We figured you could use some rest," he said, voice forced into that unnatural, calm tone people use when they know they've done something wrong but aren't ready to admit it. I stared at him. "You locked me down here." "We didn't lock you, we just closed the door." "From the outside," he hesitated. "Maya said you were overwhelmed, that maybe you needed a little space to cool off." I stood, eyes locked on him. Cool off from what? Having my life uprooted, my things moved, my work destroyed. "She's pregnant, Julia," he said, as if that answered every question. "And I'm your daughter," I replied. "Still." He blinked at that like the words physically hit him. But still, he didn't apologize, didn't ask if I was okay, didn't say my name the way he used to when I was little, when the world felt safe and small and full of bedtime stories. He just muttered, "We thought it was best," and backed away like the light might burn him. I stepped into the hallway, every part of me sore. Maya stood at the far end, arms crossed, belly prominent beneath a fitted cardigan. "I told them you needed rest," she said sweetly. "Too much stress isn't good for the baby." She was smiling, like she'd done me a favor. I didn't respond, not with words. I walked past her, past the kitchen, back to the basement door, and this time I didn't look back, because something in me had changed. They thought darkness would shrink me, but I'd learned something in the silence. They didn't just underestimate me. They didn't know me at all. The house was noisier than usual the next day. Drawers opening and slamming shut, tape stretching across cardboard boxes. Maya laughing too loud at something Greg said in the hallway, like she needed the sound to validate her place. I stayed out of sight. I wasn't hiding, I was observing. Down in the basement, I'd cleared space on the old work table, organized my documents into piles. The deed was centered like a trophy I hadn't yet decided how to present. I didn't touch it, not yet, because revenge wasn't about making noise. It was about waiting until silence would sting more. Around mid-afternoon, I went upstairs to grab Marley's favorite treat from the pantry. They were gone, of course, moved somewhere or maybe tossed. But I heard voices in the hallway, low, almost hushed. I stayed behind the half-closed pantry door. And that's when I heard it. Maya's voice, the polished sweetness stripped away. "I told you," she said. "Once she's gone, your parents will sign it over. They still think the house is in their name." My stomach dropped. Greg grunted. "I don't know, Dad's been acting weird since we moved your stuff in. You don't think Julia told him anything?" "No," Maya snapped. "She's too proud. She's still clinging to the idea they'll take her side. Just keep playing nice for a few more weeks. Once the baby's here, they'll give us anything we ask for. And if they don't," a pause, then a cold laugh from Maya. "Then we'll tell them Julia's been stashing money from the inheritance. They'll turn on her fast. They always do." I didn't move, didn't breathe. Something inside me stopped and rewound. The way she said my name like it was a technicality, a delay, something inconvenient they were working around. This wasn't about a baby. This wasn't about space. This was a takeover. They thought the house was just a house. Walls, floors, a nursery in waiting. They didn't understand that this place was history. That the roots of who I was were built into every inch of its foundation. My grandmother had chosen me, not because I needed it, but because she knew I'd protect it. And now, it was time. I didn't slam the pantry door, didn't march down the hallway and throw the truth in their faces. I just walked back down the stairs, quiet and calm, my heartbeat steady. Marley followed me, her tail curling like a question mark. I sat at the work table, opened the box of documents, and pulled out the manila envelope that held the original deed. The embossed seal shimmered slightly under the desk lamp. My name, typed clean and indisputable across the top line. It felt like holding a matchbox. All I had to do was strike it. But I wasn't going to burn anything yet. Instead, I pulled out a pen and sticky note. "Interesting plans you've got. Thought I'd hold on to this just in case." Then I slid the deed into a new envelope, folded the sticky note on top, and placed it neatly in my lockbox. They weren't the only ones who could play games. Let them think I was clueless. Let them keep whispering behind doors. Let them believe I was shrinking. Because now I had something better than anger. I had confirmation. I never expected the betrayal to come with lattes and biscotti. But there I was sitting across from a smiling realtor at a sunny cafe, the kind with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, thinking this would be the first step toward taking my life back. "I love that you came prepared," she said, flipping through the papers I'd brought. "Original deed, tax history, utility bills in your name, this all looks solid." I nodded, sipping my coffee. My hands were steady. I felt steady. The plan was simple: rent a small apartment for myself and Marley, then prep the house for sale. I'd already researched movers and checked market comps. The equity would help me start clean. Free. The realtor flipped one more page, paused, her brow furrowed just slightly. It was the kind of expression most people wouldn't notice, but I'd spent the last few weeks becoming an expert in micro-expressions. "Everything okay?" I asked. She glanced at me, then back at the document. "There's a lien," she said softly. The word landed like a slap. What?" She turned the screen toward me. "It's minor, not a deal breaker, but it's there. Placed about 14 months ago. Looks like your parents, Robert and Helen." I nodded, numb. "They borrowed against the property," she said gently. "It happens more often than you'd think, probably a home equity line of credit." "But they don't own it," I said, my voice a whisper. "They must have still believed they did," she replied. My coffee went cold in my hand. "They didn't even tell me," I murmured. I wasn't even surprised, just hollowed out. The same way you're not surprised when a wound reopens. It's not new pain, just the old one replaying. "They signed off using my house?" I asked. "And the bank didn't check. If their names were still on the county's outdated public record, it might have slipped through," she said, cautious. "It's not common, but it's not impossible." I swallowed hard. "Can it be fixed?" "Easily. It's not a large amount, just under $15,000. Once it's cleared, you can move forward. And if you're selling, the amount could just be deducted from the proceeds." Of course it could. Because now even my own escape route came with a price tag I didn't create. I thanked her, collected the papers with polite hands, and walked out with a face that didn't match the war inside me. Once I got to my car, I sat in the front seat for a long time, staring out at the sidewalk. People passed, laughing, scrolling, living in a world that hadn't just tilted sideways. My parents didn't just fail to protect me, they leveraged me. They looked at my house, my name, my future, and saw collateral, and they never said a word. Not when I offered to pay the internet bill, not when I picked up groceries, not when I gave Greg and Maya time to get settled. They'd already taken what they wanted, and planned to take more. I drove to a nearby park and sat on a bench with Marley's carrier beside me. She meowed softly, pressing her nose to the bars. I reached in and scratched her ears. "They lied," I said, not expecting her to understand. But she blinked at me like she did. I pulled out the envelope with the sticky note still attached. I'd written it as a warning. Now it felt like a prophecy. This wasn't about a room. It wasn't even about the house. It was about being invisible enough to steal from. and thinking I wouldn't notice. But I did, and I wasn't leaving quietly. The apartment smelled like paint and cardboard. It was quiet, not the kind of quiet I used to crave when the house was full of tension, but an empty kind. A hollow, echoing kind. Every sound I made felt too loud, like I was intruding in my own life. Boxes were everywhere, half of them unopened. The couch I'd ordered hadn't arrived yet, so I sat cross-legged on a folded blanket in the middle of the living room with Marley curled in my lap. And I cried. Not the kind of crying you can time or tidy. The kind that comes in waves, stealing your breath, your posture, your strength. I buried my face in her fur, hot tears sliding into her coat, and whispered the only truth I could hold in that moment. They were supposed to protect me. It wasn't about the room anymore. It wasn't even about the house. It was about the lie that ran deeper than any deed or document. That family meant safety. That blood guaranteed care. That parents would never use their child's name to tie a debt and then let her walk barefoot through the mess. I thought back to every holiday we spent in that house. Every late-night kitchen talk with my mother. Every "we're doing this for the family" my father had ever uttered. All of it now coated in a film of betrayal I couldn't scrub off. And worse than the lies was the silence. No one had called. Not Greg, not Maya, not even my mother. I'd been gone for 2 days, and the only person who'd reached out was the moving company, asking if I needed help assembling my bed frame. Even now, the house they lived in, my house, was just carrying on. Dinners being cooked, lights being turned off, my name probably spoken in past tense, like I was a season that had passed. Marley meowed gently and rubbed her head against my arm. I stroked her fur, the motion grounding me. "I think I wanted them to miss me," I whispered. "But they don't." Another tear slid down my cheek, but this one didn't sting as much. Because somewhere between the boxes and the ache, something else began to grow. Not anger, not even resolve, just space. Space to breathe without being talked over. Space to cry without being called dramatic. Space to feel betrayed and know I wasn't crazy for feeling it. And in that space, something shifted. I stood up, walked to the box labeled books and documents, and pulled out the folder. The deed. Still crisp, still clean. Still mine. I placed it gently on the countertop and stared at it for a long time. This paper didn't ask anyone's permission. It didn't care if Greg felt entitled or if Maya thought she could charm her way into ownership. It didn't matter what my parents borrowed against, this was the truth. And now I was the only one who could decide what came next. Maybe I wouldn't sell it, maybe I'd wait. Maybe I'd let them believe they'd won, just long enough for the truth to land like thunder. But for now, I walked over to my window, where Marley had jumped onto the sill, her tail flicking happily. The sun was setting outside. Gold light spilled across my bare floor, and even with the empty shelves and the silence, it felt safe. Not whole, but safe. 3 days later, I returned to the house. Not quietly, not hesitantly, not as the girl who once stood small in that hallway, apologizing for breathing too loud. This time, I arrived in a trench coat and sunglasses, clipboard in hand, standing beside a moving truck with men in uniform unloading dollies and plastic wrap like a tactical team. My boots hit the driveway with purpose. Marley sat in her carrier at the front of the truck, observing like a dignitary. She knew what this was. It was extraction. The front door was unlocked, of course it was. They never imagined I'd come back with reinforcements. I stepped inside. The house smelled the same. Cinnamon, soap, and entitlement. The movers followed me in without a word, professional and practiced. I gave them clear instructions. Living room everything, couches, rug, TV, shelves. They nodded, I turned. Kitchen next, appliances, utensils, that stupid rooster clock over the stove, don't leave a fork. The man smirked and nodded again. The house echoed with movement. Boxes thudded, tape ripped, furniture scraped. It was a glorious, controlled chaos, and that's when the shriek came. Maya. She appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing leggings and one of my old college sweatshirts like some kind of insult. "What the hell is going on?" I looked up at her, expression neutral. "Good morning." She stormed down the stairs. "Are you out of your mind? You can't just send strangers into this house and—" "Actually," I said, pulling the deed from my clipboard and holding it up. "I can. This house is legally mine." She froze mid-step. "No," she said, voice faltering. No, that's not, your parents said. Wrong again. Greg appeared behind her, bleary-eyed and stunned. Julia, what are you doing? I turned to him slowly, taking back what's mine. Wait, he said, hands raised like this was a hostage situation. We thought you moved out. I did, I replied evenly. To give you space, not to hand over ownership. You can't just come in and… I gave you 3 months, I snapped. You took my room, my laptop, my clothes. You locked me in a basement. You borrowed against my house without permission. Maya's face went pale. We didn't know. You didn't ask. I stepped forward, voice rising. You took advantage of me. You manipulated Mom and Dad. You planned to trick them into signing over property they never owned. And for what? A nursery, a fresh start? Greg opened his mouth, closed it again. I turned back to the movers. Bedrooms next. Don't leave a pillow. Maya ran to block the hallway. You can't do this. I met her eyes, cool and level. This was never your house to begin with. Her face twisted, voice cracking. You're doing this now. I'm pregnant. And I'm done being quiet. Behind her, my parents stood in the kitchen doorway, silent, unsure. My mother held a tea towel like a white flag she didn't know how to raise. I didn't wait for them to speak. I reached into the envelope, pulled out a second set of papers, and handed them to Greg. He stared at them. His lips moved, reading. His hands shook slightly. That's the deed, I said softly. In my name, filed, verified, dated. Maya collapsed onto the porch, staring at the papers like they were written in fire. It's not true, she whispered. Tell me it's not true. Greg looked up at me. You planned this, I held his gaze. No, you did, I just finished it. My father stepped forward. Julia, I turned to him, calm but clear. There's a small bungalow near 9th Street. 2 bedrooms, enough for you and Mom. Keys are in the mailbox. The first 6 months are paid. He blinked. You're giving it to us. No, I said, I'm giving you peace. I turned back to the movers. Wrap up in the next hour, we're done here. And just like that, I walked out the front door, not broken, not bitter, just done. It should have felt like a victory. But as I stood at the edge of the lawn, arms crossed while the movers packed the last of the furniture, I felt something stranger than triumph. I felt quiet, not empty, not cold, just still. Behind me, Greg stood on the porch, shoulders hunched, one hand dangling at his side like he didn't know what to do with it. Maya sat stiffly in the patio chair, one hand resting protectively over her belly, the other gripping the armrest like it might run away without her. Neither of them said a word as the last box disappeared into the truck, until I turned to face them one last time. Greg stepped forward first. Julia, look about all this. I held up a hand, stopping him. Then, without a word, I pulled out a crisp printout from my folder and placed it into his hand. He looked down at it, blinked. It was the deed, the real one, with my name, not my parents', not shared, no co-signers, just me. And now Greg's name paled against it like a ghost story in daylight. You were going to steal what you never owned, I said, calm but razor-sharp. You thought if you smiled enough, if you said family enough times, you'd be able to convince everyone that you belonged here more than I did. He opened his mouth, eyes wide. I didn't mean to, but you did, I cut in. You meant every word when you told me I should leave. You meant every just let it go. Every time you called me sensitive. You meant it when you locked me in that basement. Maya rose slowly from the chair, looking between the two of us. Her face had lost all its usual gloss, no more practiced sweetness, no more pretending. It's not true, she whispered. Tell me it's not true. Greg didn't answer. He just kept staring at the paper like it might rewrite itself if he stared long enough. I turned to Maya. You lied, you manipulated, you called yourself family, then plotted behind my back to take the only thing I had left. I'm pregnant, she said softly, as if that should still carry weight. I know, I replied. And I hope your child grows up knowing what respect looks like, because neither of you modeled it here. Behind them, the screen door creaked. My parents stood inside, watching, not speaking. My mother's eyes were glassy, her mouth parted like she wanted to say something. My father gripped the door frame, knuckles white. I didn't wait for them to speak. I reached into my folder and tossed a small envelope toward the porch. It slid across the boards and landed at my father's feet. He bent to pick it up. The keys to the bungalow, I said. 2 bedrooms, 6 months rent paid in full. You can live out your days in peace, just like you always said you wanted. He stared at me, eyes wide. My mother stepped forward. Julia, I loved you both, I said. I still do in a way, but love doesn't mean letting yourself be erased. She opened her mouth to respond, but I had nothing else to give her. I turned back to the truck and gave the foreman a small nod. That's everything, I said. He smiled politely and climbed into the cab. As the truck rolled down the street, carrying everything I owned away from the house I once called home, I stood still in the driveway for one last breath. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the front lawn. Greg looked at me, face pale. "Where will you go?" I smiled faintly. "Somewhere mine." Then I turned and walked down the sidewalk without looking back, not because I didn't care, but because I finally did. And that made all the difference. Asheville greeted me like an old friend I didn't know I'd been missing. There was something about the Blue Ridge skyline, the sleepy hum of early cafes, the unapologetic calm of a town that didn't ask me to be anyone but exactly who I was. No stage, no role to fill, no one calling my name unless they meant it. The apartment was modest, but it had bones I liked. Exposed brick in the kitchen. Slanted afternoon light that made even unopened boxes glow. The kind of space that didn't talk back. I painted the living room walls a warm terracotta, a color I never would have picked before but now felt like home. A place that looked good with shadows, even better with laughter. On the third day, I built my own bookshelves. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to know that the things I leaned on now, I'd made with my own hands. Marley, of course, claimed the top shelf of the built-in by the window. It became her throne, her lookout point while I drank tea and learned how to be still without being scared. One morning, I found myself sitting on the floor, paint on my arms, sipping chamomile as birds chirped outside, and I realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. Not anymore. There were moments when it crept in, when I'd open a box and find a photo or a receipt in my mother's handwriting or one of the tea towels Maya had ruined. But the burn didn't stick. I'd blink, breathe, and let it pass. That night, I made myself a small dinner, roasted vegetables and rice, nothing fancy. I played an old playlist, lit a candle that smelled like cedar and oranges, and sat on the little balcony off my bedroom, watching the street below wind into evening. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it. Greg. One missed call. No voicemail. 10 minutes later, another buzz. Mom, just her name. No message. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then turned the phone face down and went back to my plate. I'd told them everything I needed to, through silence, through the truth on paper, through the locked door I never had to knock on again. Now, the only space that mattered was the one I was learning to fill on my own. And Marley, bless her, she knew. She jumped onto my lap like she'd been planning it all day, curled up, and let out a deep, satisfied purr that rumbled through both of us. I looked out over the city lights flickering against the mountains and thought, this is what safety feels like. Not silence forced upon you, but quiet you choose. The apartment didn't hold history. It held possibility. No more walking on eggshells. No more asking permission to exist. No more pretending not to hear when people spoke about you like you were a burden wrapped in obligation. Now I could speak for myself. Now I had a voice not shaken by their doubt, but strengthened by my own choice to walk away. I poured myself another cup of tea and leaned back. There was no revenge. No dramatic scene. No headlines, just me, whole. Still here. Still mine. 1 year later, I walked past a bookstore window and froze. There it was. My name. Or more accurately, my new beginning. The display featured 5 copies of a soft-cover book with a warm, coral-toned cover. The title floated above it in clean serif type. Home is boundaries, reclaiming your space and self. Julia E. Weller. I stood on the sidewalk, heart beating in this strange, measured rhythm, like it was pacing itself for a marathon I hadn't realized I was running. A man in a flannel jacket paused beside me, glanced at the display, and said, "You've heard of her." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think I've heard enough." He kept walking. I stayed, watching as a young woman stepped inside and picked up a copy. She thumbed through it like she was looking for something personal. Like maybe something in those pages could answer a question she hadn't dared to ask out loud yet. I hoped she found it. Writing the book hadn't been some grand plan. It started as scribbles. Journal entries, therapy homework, voice memos during long walks with Marley through the Asheville hills. Just me, trying to untangle what had happened. trying to make sense of a betrayal that felt too ordinary to be a tragedy, too deep to be brushed off. But the more I wrote, the more I realized I wasn't alone. Every woman I met had a version of my story. A sister-in-law who moved in like she owned the place. A parent who believed gratitude meant silence. A partner who mistook love for control. A boss who saw tears as weakness instead of survival. We'd all been told to stay small for someone else's comfort. So I wrote, not to accuse, not to humiliate, but to illuminate. To give language to the things we feel in our bones but have been taught not to say out loud. That a closed door can be a rescue. That distance is sometimes the only path back to yourself. That leaving doesn't mean you gave up, it means you chose you. Inside the bookstore, I watched as another woman picked up the book. Middle-aged, soft cardigan wedding band. She opened it directly to chapter 3. The basement wasn't the beginning, it was the mirror. I remembered writing that line. Remembered how my hands had trembled over the keyboard, the memory of cold concrete beneath me, the eerie silence of being locked away by people who claimed to love me. But I also remembered what came next. Not rage, not revenge, power. The kind you whisper to yourself when no one else is listening. I finally stepped inside, partly to warm up from the October chill and partly to remind myself that this was real. That the girl who once cried on a basement floor was now here, upright, calm, and walking into a room filled with her own words. The clerk looked up and smiled. "You're Julia, right?" I blinked. "I am." She motioned to a stack behind the register. "We sold out of the pre-orders if you want to sign a few." I took the pen she offered and nodded. I signed quietly, one after the other, adding a small note in each. "You are not too much. You are just enough." Julia, as I walked back home, the leaves were turning. Red, orange, and gold flutters danced down around me, the mountain breeze light against my face. Marley was waiting by the door when I got in. Older now, slower, but still full of that quiet, loyal spirit. She meowed at me like she was saying, finally. I set my bag down and walked into the kitchen where the walls were still terracotta, where the shelves were full, and the light still poured in just right. Around 4 p.m. I made tea. Sat by the window. No missed calls, no guilt, just peace. The kind I'd earned, the kind I'd defended. The kind that told me I'd never go back to that house, not even in my mind, because I had built something stronger than walls. I had built a life where respect lives. If you felt seen by Julia's journey, tell me in the comments. What part hit closest to home? And if you've ever had to choose yourself, no matter how hard, know this: you didn't betray anyone. You reclaimed you. Thank you for walking every step with Julia. If her story moved you, like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone sitting in their own version of a basement, just waiting to be reminded they can rise. They will. You will.